One of the most common questions I get all the time is, Chuck, where do I get fiber training? Chuck, why is fiber so hard? Why won't they teach me fiber? Welcome to the show where we tackle the tough questions submitted by installers, estimators, project managers, and even customers. We're connecting at the human level so that we can connect the world. If you're watching this show on YouTube, would you mind hitting the subscribe button and then the bell button to be notified when new content is being produced? If you're listening to us on one of the podcast platforms such as iTunes or Stitcher, would you mind giving us a 5-star rating? Those couple little steps helps us take on that algorithm so we can get this message out and encourage and enrich the lives of more people in our industry. Thursday nights, 6 p.m. What are you doing? There's an after hours live show with Chuck Bowser RCDD where you get to ask your favorite RCDD, that would be me, your questions on installation, documentation, certification, even career path. But I can hear you now, Chuck, I'm driving. I can't watch a video while I'm driving. I'll get in an accident. They are recorded and put on the website so you can watch them at your convenience. Also, this show is free and will always remain free, but we're always looking for people to help support the show because it does cost money to produce a show. So would you mind consider going to Patreon and looking at that, maybe become a Patreon subscriber where you get additional access to information. You can even buy me a cup of coffee or even schedule a 15-minute Zoom call with me one-on-one after hours. Just check out the QR code that's on the screen. One of the most common questions I get all the time is, Chuck, where do I get fiber training? Chuck, why is fiber so hard? Why won't they teach me fiber? Well, I brought on a guest today whom I met at the Bixie conference. And they were kind of sitting over in a little corner. I was walking with a friend of mine. He goes, hey, do you want to meet the Light Brigade folks? I'm like, do I want to? I probably dragged him, with him over there to meet these guys. So welcome to the show, Sean Kelly RCDD. How are you doing, my friend?
Doing well. Well, Chuck, thanks for having me on. This is a great opportunity to talk to you. I know we talked a lot at the conference, but you said you wanted to get me on and address some of these topics. So looking forward to it.
Absolutely. And feel free if you think of a topic as we're going through this conversation, because I'm open to any conversation. But before we get too much further along, we got it for those who may not know of you or Light Brigade. They've been living in the dark for a long time if they haven't. But let's be honest, there are some new people to the industry. Just give us the 30-second career show, how you got to where you're at, and then also tell us a little bit about Light Brigade.
All right, 30-second.
I'm not timing you. I'm not timing you.
So anyway, I actually started my career in the later '90s with AMP Incorporated, a name that some people in the industry may have known. AMP actually created the first fiber optic connector, and I had the pleasure of working with a lot of those first generation pioneers and engineers who taught me. So very interesting. I read this morning on LinkedIn, I saw a comment that someone says, when interviewing someone and they say they have 20 years of experience, is it 20 years of growing experience or is it 1 year repeated 20 times? And ironically, that got me thinking today that, I've got 24 years in the industry with fiber. And because of that early background, learning from those folks, from the guys that pioneered the fiber connectors and cable assemblies and things like that, I almost wonder if my 24 years doesn't actually have more experience. It's, I looked at that and thought, I've had a lot of fortune throughout my career. Really have never asked for the progression from starting out as a test engineer, and going through manufacturing, development, product engineering, product management, even field application engineering on the enterprise side throughout those years, and that, evolved from the AMP to the Tyco Electronics, the T connectivity, the acquisition of ADC, and even into CommScope. And then I left and I went and spent some time with Rosenberger. Actually, after CommScope, I went back to TE, but then I went to Rosenberger for a little while. And then I joined Light Brigade. And, one of the things I'm really happy where I'm at this point in my career, because for the first, I'll say half of my career, I spent a lot of that time advancing fiber and the advancements, helping people learn. And then the second half of it, I kind of learned the business side and the field side and a lot of that stuff. And I'm actually back to a point where I think that I'm advancing and now helping to educate the next generation of folks getting into fiber. And so, it's just almost come for full circle, but it's really what I enjoy.
I like how what you said in the very, very beginning. I've said this many times. Just because that's the way your grandfather did cabling doesn't mean we still do cabling that way. And
Well,
you've got to be a constant learner. I mean, if you try to put a category 6A cable in today, the way we used to put in POTS cabling with staples and stuff, it just is not going to work. It isn't. So
well, Chuck, I remember. I mean, it is a constant learning thing. I go back. I was just telling somebody about this the other day. A former colleague of mine who's actually working in the test lab at TE right now, where I started my career, but he and I were manufacturing engineers together when the LC connector come out. Now, in my brain, that was yesterday, but when you look back, that's been 20 couple years now.
right.
And as we know, Lucent had created that connector, and they had a very, very large project called Lambda Router. And they had been looking for people to be able to learn the termination or establish a termination process for the LC connector and be able to help them evolve that into that program. And if TE or Tyke, or actually we were Tyke Electronics at the time, we were tapped to do that. And a colleague of mine, he and I spent our time learning how to terminate an LC connector, coming up with a polishing process that would work on this strange new 1.25 millimeter connector. Now, we played with the MU a little bit, but it wasn't quite the same. And I recall that, we tried to do it the way our grandfathers always did it. And I remember we were actually, we spent a little under 38 hours continuously working 3 shifts with our production folks to try to fine tune the end face geometry and the polishing, the clarity on it and things like that to get that process. And then add on top of that, it was all depressed flat, so a lot of new things going on at that point. But, we had to, at the time, we didn't know we were reinventing the wheel. But looking back on it, we did have to reinvent the wheel. And later on, there ended up being more geometry specifications that were different than what we did for a 2.5 millimeter, something like that. But been a lot of those over the years, but it's just really, you have to often think, is the pathway always the right way?
Yeah, exactly. I spent, I guess, 85% of my career in the field, either as an installer or project manager or an estimator. It's only the last part of my career that I've really worked for manufacturing. And as an installer, you just take it for granted that, oh, they just come up with a new product. They just probably just threw it on a piece of paper and built it. There's a lot of effort on the backside on the manufacturing side, coming up with a new product, testing it, writing the instructions for it, and then having it proofread, and there's a lot of work on the backside of that. And you mentioned MUs. And I taught a bunch of classes last week, 4 of them, right? And MU's on one of our slides, and somebody asked me, well, I've never seen an MU, and I had to think because I've never seen one either. Is that something we use in the U.S. or is that found somewhere outside of the U.S. predominantly?
So for a little while, probably about 99, 2000 timeframe, the MU was in that cycle of the small form factor connector of the battle. I mean, if you remember, we had, there was the F3000, which was the little guy of the E2000. Leviton had they had one, the ADC LX.5. There were a lot of small form factor connectors, the MTRJ, all those fighting for that small form factor. And, at one point it really narrowed down to 3. It really narrowed down to the MTRJ, the LC, and the MU. And eventually, between the MU and the LC had won out in North America. Now, around the world, the MU is still used and has been used. Now, it's a little different purpose. But the MU was a very innovative connector, so it was really a mini SC. It looks like an SC connector, miniaturized.
Mm-hmm.
And what a lot of people don't know is that there used to be 3 different versions of that. It used to be the plug side of it. There used to be a behind the wall, which was a very, very short end, which really gave you a lot of space in a wall outlet. And it also was able to use as a blind mate. There was one that didn't have the retraction housing, that it also could be blind mated on a say a daughter card for a backplane application or something like that. And that's really where a lot of people were betting their money that the MU would win out because it had that backplane ability. And I think, when the tech bubble burst, things slowed down a little bit. Within the whole industry, a lot of things had slowed down. And I think that drive for an optical backplane fizzled. Now today, 20 some years later, it's back on the table. But I think that's what really cut the MU, at least in North America, as being the winner in that. But it is still used in Japan. It was, I believe, it was created in around 1991 or 92 by NTT. I could be wrong on that. I believe that was an early 90s connector. Which NTT at that time did a lot of innovation that we don't even think of. If you really think back to the original MPO connector, that's an early 90s connector. And a lot of people think, oh, no, that was mid 2000s. Well, no, that it really wasn't. It was the MTP, the enhanced version was, but that was a much earlier connector. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of confusion about the MTP versus the MPO. And one is a little bit better than the other because of the way that it's manufactured. Can you kind of just briefly hit those differences?
Sure, absolutely. So essentially they are the same footprint connector. So NTT had originally developed the original MPO, and then around, I guess it was 1997, 98, is when US Connect, who's partially owned by NTT, they made the enhanced version. And really what that did was it took the loss from much higher, about a 1.5 or even a little greater per channel. It had a tighter tolerance on the guide pins, tighter tolerance on the fiber spacing and things like that in the Faro. It just really made it a higher performing connector. And that's really what took it mainstream. So today, manufacturers still refer to it as MPO and MTP. Anything that you see on the market today is going to be of that performance of the MTP. So you don't have to really worry and say, okay, well, hey, that's not an MTP per brand, so it's lower or higher performing. So I used to say to people, I say, all MTPs are MPOs, but not all MPOs are MTPs. If you run across an original MPO connector today, grab it and fight the Smithsonian for it, because it's not going to find. Nobody's been using those for 20, 25 years. It's just, they're not there.
Right.
Everything MTP is a trademark brand name of US Connect. So just because you see another manufacturer that's not using it, that doesn't mean it's a lesser connector.
Gotcha. So you work for Light Brigade.
I do. Yeah.
What is Light Brigade? What if somebody's just coming into the industry and they hear that name? What would you want them to know about Light Brigade? What do they do?
So Light Brigade, we specialize in fiber optic training. Our major differentiator from the rest of the industry is we focus heavily on the hands-on part of it. Now we do get you deep into the theory, but we also apply all that theory into an immersive hands-on. And Light Brigade's been around. This is our 35th year. So we've been around for 35 years. We've trained over 75,000 techs throughout those 35 years. We have associations with the ETA, Electronic Technician Association, Fiber Broadband Association, Utilities Council, and a few others where we actually perform the training that goes to their credential. So if you're sitting for one of their credentials, you're going to go through a Light Brigade class. We're talking, you're an RCDD, I'm an RCDD. We also have many of our classes are also eligible for BICSI CEC. So some of them, I think our highest, it might be 28 CECs for one of our classes that we have. So, yeah, it's a build on from the early days when Light Brigade was started, and has built on ever since. I've come on wearing many hats, but one of mine is taking a lot of those industry leading trainings, but I've actually redeveloped them, modernized them, made them a little bit more fun. Because if we are getting into the younger generation, they don't learn the way the older folks, had learned. And so I've got to keep it to a point that it still interests the older generation, but is attractive and not boring to a fresh up and coming tech.
I had that same challenge because my day job, the podcast, everybody knows the podcast is my after hours gig, but my day job, I'm a trainer. And you're right. I had a class this week where it was about split evenly. The 50% had less than 2 years experience, and they were all, I would say, between 18 and 22, 23. And the other ones were just old Ma Bell guys. And that's something really difficult as an instructor, because you don't want to bore the old guys and you don't want to lose the new guys. It's really, really hard to do as an instructor. And I'm always looking for ways on how to reach the younger audience, because our industry is getting old, and we need to attract more people into this industry. And one of the things that people love to do is they get in, they want to learn fiber because they think there's a lot of money with that. We'll get into that in a little bit, but what challenges do you see for students who are just brand new to the industry and they're struggling to learn when it comes to fiber?
So it's very interesting. It takes you back to, you were at the Dixie Winter Conference, and there was the discussion. I believe it was Lee Renfro and Betsy Conroy were on the main stage and talking about the average age of technicians, and for every 3 technician that's in their 50s, there's really 1 to follow in their footsteps, and so we're going to have this huge gap. And through that, it actually challenged me to take a little deeper look at that situation. I actually reached out to Betsy to get some of the information, and I've looked into it, and it's interesting to see how the younger generations, not only that they're not interested in getting a credential, it's they're of the digital generation where there's a certain Facebook web page that I follow, and I don't comment on it because, frankly, I'm an old guy and I'll get into too many arguments with people. But this particular website, it showcases disasters in fiber installations, and yet there's just as many followers that are generation divide there. And when people will come on and someone will ask a question, where can I go for fiber training? What fiber training should I get? You get a certain part of the demographic who's suggesting different places and why it's important, and why structured learning, why the practice, why working with mentors. And there are plenty of others in the younger generation said, all you need is an Amazon Fusion Splicer and 2 minutes of a 9-minute YouTube video. So there is that fundamental issue, is even just the idea of saying, okay, you can't learn everything on YouTube, or you're probably going to end up having your work showcased on that particular page as well. So to do that, there's a lot of driving issues, really trying to attract those younger folks. And we're doing it. I know Fiber Broadband Association, they're doing it with their what's called their Optic program, and trying to really target that 17 to 24-year-old to come and go through a class, and then in theirs goes on to an apprenticeship, preparing you for a job in the industry. We take a little different approach in that we are only dealing with like the companies who are sending their technicians to school. I do think they may be a little bit more receptive on that because their employers sending them, but at the same time, we really have to keep it interesting. One of the things that I've done is started implementing something called Kahoot. I'm not sure if you've ever seen that, but Kahoot is a gamification of review. So where we've all been used to the question 1, 2, 3, 4 that an instructor asks, and everybody, type up your own answer. We as instructors, we all know that if you ask 8 questions, you have 10 people in class, the same 2 people are always answering. So one of the things that I've done with this Kahoot is the gamification is when the instructor is asking the question, there's an image up there to multiple choice or true false, but there's an app that they're using their phone and they answer. Well, it tracks to show that all students are answering. It also gives a distribution of results. So if 8 people out of 8 got it correct, the instructor knows, hey, they know the information, they can move on. If there are half and half, well, wait a minute, that's a time and opportunity to review just to make sure we actually are learning. That's something you never would have learned before, but it's also more appealing to that younger generation. We're also exploring, we have also a lot of self-paced trainings where we're literally, now it's not short. That's the only thing, I'd like to do it self-paced. People don't understand that one of our classes is, if you have some experience, that self-paced course still takes you about 22 hours to go through. But it is more of that digital learning, that interaction, click on this video, answer these questions, a lot of that interaction. And I'll say the third thing that I've done is hey, I'm not an expert at making appealing to the youngest generation coming into the market, but really trying to implement programs with apps. Like our newest program on our fiber optic 1, 2, 3 and our fusion splicers. We're using it's a fusion splicing app that interacts with the fusion splice machine. It also has tutorial videos. We're doing it with some of our microscopes that they're using as a smart device on their phone, and that's how they're controlling it, storing it, things like that. So it is really trying to appeal to them as opposed to the pen and paper era.
Yeah, that's you said so much stuff there. I could just kind of go all over and expound all over. But I like the app thing. Is that a free app or is that a paid app?
Which one is that?
The Cahoots.
Oh, so the Kahoot, we as a company, we do pay for that to have our instructors. So each license is it's a seat, but it integrates right into PowerPoint. And so literally, as you get to that slide there, what it does is it comes up, has a PIN number or a QR code. They just scan the QR code with their phone, takes them right into it to give themselves a nickname. We've actually also done a little bit motivation on it, where the top three. So if we have, just say, a class has 16 chapters, they have a podium. So your top three out of every chapter get on the podium, and we record all of that, the data points. And then at the end of the class, the instructor tallies it up, and the top three students get to come up and pick a fairly premium prize, whether it's a tool belt, a visual fault locator, or a fiber optic cleaning kit. And it's really it's got into this heated contest where it's fun to watch some of the classes, because where used to be a lot of individuals, and the only competition you ever see if it was the same company. We're now seeing people have never met each other, and they're street talking to each other.
Right.
You're not going to get this one right now. I got this. You can't catch me. Really, it's fun to actually see the interaction. It makes learning fun. It's really what happens.
I mean, I think that's brilliant because, and the brilliant part of that is now anybody can answer the question without fear of saying the wrong answer and having everybody kind of glare at them. Oh my God, I can't believe you said that. And I kind of do it. I kind of do, I guess, Cahoots manually right now in my classes, because usually what I'll do is, if somebody comes up with a really good answer, I'll go, "You got 10,000 points," and everybody's like, "Wow, he's got 10,000 points." I always tell them that the points are useless and they expire at the end of the class. But then you're right, they do. They start the last class I taught on Friday. They were like they were battling to see who can get to first place, right? So and that's brilliant because you're tying in the app, because the younger generation, they are very technology heavy. They love apps and they love anything they can do with an app. You get people like my age. I'm kind of like an exception to the rule, more or less, because I was always an early adopter. But I had to talk to somebody. Oh, I don't do apps at all. I'm like, well, you're missing out on a lot of stuff, because there's a lot of cool information. There's an app to do fiber optic loss calculations, free. All you do is just download it.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. And it sounds like you're making really good progress with the younger students, and that's something I always challenge myself to, because I got to think outside of the box, because I can't train an 18 to 25-year-old the way that I was trained, because they will get lost. They just it's not exciting, and it's not something they can just latch onto and stuff. So
Yeah. Well, we also give a Light Brigade exam, and then also at the end of the 4 days of typical class, someone will sit for their industry certification test. So ours is kind of a practice test. But one of the things that particular program does is, on their phones, once we go through every chapter, they're able to go back and review all those questions. Kahoot has a part of it in there, changed into flashcards for them to study. They can practice on time, how well they get it. So it's actually a study guide for them as well, after the fact. And so that's again, it's a little different than probably you and I scouring through a manual and taking notes, and it's a little different way of studying and learning.
yeah, when you couple in, not just a younger audience, but also when you look at the students that you and I are standing in front of on a regular basis, they are tactile learners. That's why I love the fact that you said that the majority of your class is hands-on. Most technicians in this field are tactile learners. They'll remember maybe 15% of what you tell them in a lecture 6 months from that date. But if you put a connector in their hand, or you have them fusion splicing, they're going to remember that a lot better than any spoken word that you could ever say.
That's 100% correct. And we now, as I mentioned, we do cover the theory part of it, Chuck, because one of the things that I often see in the field, and you've seen it, I've seen it, we all seen it, is there's a lot of passed down methods, right? And just because duct tape holds it together doesn't mean that's the right solution. I mean, yeah, it's all good engineering flow chart. I've always loved that. If it moves and it shouldn't move, you need WD-40. If it doesn't move and it should, you need WD-40. If it moves and it shouldn't, you need duct tape. But you see a lot of, I can't even think of the word, we've always called it tribal practices and things like that, but it's probably not the right word anymore to say, but I can't think of another word where it's just something's been bad habits, I'll say, are passed on, or the understanding of a thought of why something's working a certain way isn't the real reason. And what we've actually found is a lot of feedback from students who go through the classes saying, I've been in the industry this long. I didn't know that. It makes a lot more sense what I'm doing hands-on because I know the why behind that.
Yes.
So there is still the value in that theory, but you can't just provide a theory and then a demonstration to somebody. And that's a lot of times what happens we've seen it in other trainings is you just demo something. Nobody gets anything from a demo. They've got to get their hands dirty.
Yeah, I call those pizza diploma programs where the instructor will come in and they'll just throw 3 or 4 slides and then they'll say, these are our new products, and hey, look, there's some pizza in the back, thanks for coming. But you're right, you do have to teach the theory part of it, because we get told, oh, the jokes have to be 4 to 5 feet apart at random distances, and they shouldn't overload them, and if you don't explain why, there's no buy-in there, right? You have to explain to why that standard is there, so they understand when they see it, it's going to impact the performance. So there's always a value to it, but the challenge is with students is students love the hands-on stuff, but the lecture portion, you see it more than once. They get that, they'll start off really good, but then they start kind of going
right. And so that is another thing, with using that Kahoot and I've also even started to put things in as we talk about a dry subject. Is it total internal reflection? Well, okay, it's important. It leads us into what happens when you're bending and other things like that. But I go in and place in a couple other things like a common area that may see that. Like I show a picture of Bellagio fountains. When they're lit up at night, that is total internal reflection. The water's acting like the core, our air is acting like the cladding, and it's holding it in there. It just kind of related to real life. I have also put in some did you knows here and there, just a trivia, just to kind of break up the monotony of what the instructors are saying. But that's another thing with our instructors. We're always looking for good industry folks to be an instructor, whether it's a contractor or a full-time instructor. But a lot of it brings their stories from them being in the field.
yes.
That is a differentiator, and you can't sell that. If Chuck, you had your time in the field, you had a specific story that you're going to tell. I can't retell your story and sell that as a bit of mine. That's what makes it genuine and engaging, rather than just
Right.
going on and on and on about this particular topic.
Another great one I do is when I'm teaching is, especially again, total internal reflection, right? Because some students just don't grasp it. There's a really cool YouTube video, and if you go to type in how fiber works, the channel I think is called Engineer Guy, ENGNR Guy. He's not necessarily communication. He's just an engineer, and he takes a 5-gallon bucket of water. First it's just a 5-gallon bucket. On one side he drills a hole and he puts a cork plug in it. On the other side he cuts a hole and he puts a clear plastic thing on so you can shine light through it, and seals that up, fills it with water, fills it with glycol, puts a laser pointer on one side, pulls out the cork plug in the other. Of course, the water just wants to stream down, and you can see the light literally just staying on the water. And it's a total difference refraction between the air and the water.
Well, that's the John Tyndall experiment, and we actually showed pictures of that. And when I used to instruct, I used to carry a trash can around. I would go to customer sites, they didn't like it when I just take my pocket knife out and bore a hole in their trash can. So I started carrying my own. It works. You can pack other tools in there, but I used to demonstrate that. And it's a really good demonstration for people to see that. Because prior to Tyndall demonstrating that, people thought that light could not be bent. And so he was, again, the first one to demonstrate it. He wasn't the one that theorized it, but that is a great experiment. And actually, I have seen that video you were talking about, and it is a great explanation for that. And it's almost sometimes those simple little demonstrations that are much more valuable than a formula. And that's really one of the things I've also tried to peel out of a lot of our trainings is So a lot of the formula, the science, there is a science behind it, but making it an application science, make
Right.
someone really, really understand that.
Right. So let me ask you this. Have you seen an increase in interest in people wanting to get fiber training over the last few years?
Well, we've had an interesting few years, as you know. So we did actually initially did see a decline. Well, we saw an overall decline. I think everybody really has in the industry. We saw that really, really sharp drop off between March and April in 2020. And actually, at that time, Light Brigade had scrambled to do video recordings of some of the training, knowing that people couldn't do it as in person. And that picked up for the next 2 or 3 months. But even throughout the pandemic, we really never did stop doing the in-person training. It became a little more difficult finding venues that we could stay all 6 feet apart, the masking, the gloves, not sharing tools. There were a lot of protocols we had to put in place. So it did come up, but it still wasn't pre-COVID throughout the last 2 years. It wasn't the pre-COVID levels. Um, I will say in the last couple months, things have started to spike. There are a lot of people now sending their employees for training where there were no travel policies, where they no training, nobody coming into their facilities. So we have really seen an uptick in that in the last couple months. Do I think it's back to pre-pandemic? Maybe not, but there is definitely a lot of interest out there. Some of it I think is people really looking at this RDOF funding, the broadband, bringing broadband to everyone. And there's a lot of money out there, federal money that people are going to be installing. And oh gosh, your name's Chuck. I can't even. Well, I can install it. I used to say, you have 2 trucks in a truck, right?
Right, right, right.
These guys probably painted parking lot stripes last week. This week, they're all of a sudden doing fiber. I think that people are recognizing that those guys are not what's going to make us successful. And so you've got a lot of, people that might have even been in the enterprise space, the low voltage guys saying, you know what, I've got the basic skill of this. I can expand my business out to here. Instead of sending people to school, to us and others for that. The big uptick has definitely been in that fiber to the home. We have, I think, 5 programs that are progressively with our fiber to the home and outside plant. That goes anywhere from to installer technician, up to full outright design, full design course. But so we've seen more of a trend toward that area as well. Unfortunately, I've just seen a trend away from our traditional enterprise, like our fiber optics for enterprise networks. And I don't know if it's just that things are leveling out in that space, or that there's plenty of trained folks in that space right now. But yeah, we've definitely seen that trend towards that fiber to the home. Again, that's all the buzz right now, right? That's everybody's talking about.
Well, I'm glad that because you mentioned at the very beginning of the show that you guys do all the fiber training that you're doing. I'm glad to see you doing just outside of the enterprise stuff, because a lot of people get pigeonholed into just doing backbone fiber and they don't really realize, well, fiber to the home is a whole different ball game. And unless you're trained on it, like for example, I only know fiber to the home from reading it. I've never actually done fiber to the home, but I know that it's a whole different animal when you're comparing it to backbone in an office building.
Well, over the years, I've just seen it in my career that there's a blurred line between what is outside plant, what is inside plant.
Mm-hmm.
Like say on a university campus 15 years ago, if you were in the confines of the brick walls, that was indoor. If it was going building to building, that was an outside plant.
Right.
If you're on that kind of campus, that's a blurred line now, because you have your enterprise guys covering all of that. And then you've even got things like passive optical LAN. And I've got a little background in that, but passive optical LAN is really taking your standard fiber to the home and making it a private local area network as a different topology. So there's that blurred line. And so one of the things that I see is we're at a point now that your knowledge of just indoor can easily translate to an outside. And just like an outside person who's been a pulse splicer or something like that can, within reason, transition to the inside world. Now, I mean, obviously with a little bit, your difference between NEC and NESC and things like that. But but for the most part, the fundamentals are the same. And that's one thing where I try to attract people coming into the industry and want to get this training is, just because you train in a specialized field does not mean that you're stuck in that forever. There's a lot of opportunity across our whole industry. Because you really think about it, all of our networks, the network that's on the indoor in a local area network, that originated as a metropolitan area network, right? It went through the outside plant to reach that building. So you're just expanding your horizon. So, yeah.
Yeah, and the more things you know how to do, the more valuable you are as an employee or a company. And all your good companies are not going to put all of its eggs in one basket, because what if the inside plant business kind of dries up for a little while? Well, if you can do outside plant and inside plant, well, then that kind of helps you weather those kinds of storms.
Right, and it sort of leads back to the area where I kind of lost my train of thought before, but when you're exposed to more of those, you have more of an appreciation for the work that you're doing. Like a lot of times you'll see outside plant tech guys. I mean, the only thing you have to do is drive down the street and look at the way some enclosures are hanging, or the way that people hang their slack loops, or just that Facebook page I was talking about, some of the disasters. A lot of people they think of it as my job as a splicer. They're not thinking as themselves as a cabling professional or an infrastructure professional. And it's not because it's not obvious to them. I think it's just one of those things that is their job, to connect those two things. They're burning a piece of glass together. If they recognize what they're doing and how that is impacting a data center, or how that's impacting a business or the company's website, that they want to go to their website. If people would really start thinking about that full end to end, I think in all areas, we probably would have a lot more pride in how things are designed and deployed. And not everything's a disaster, obviously, we know that. But there are things in there, and they end up being that kink of why your internet connection is disrupted, or why you're in this area and you have slow speeds, or things like that.
There's several websites out there that are very similar to what you described. And even if you look at my social media presence, and like I said, I got on TikTok to reach that younger audience, and I'm closing in on 2,000 followers on that page. And when you look at my posts, I mean, they all get pretty good traction. They're anywhere from a couple hundred to 1,000 or 2,000. But the ones that always seem to get the most traction, every once in a while I'll throw up a picture of some closet that's just horrible, and those get the most traction, and those start the conversations. Like I just did one just I think it was Thursday or Friday, where somebody took it was a faceplate with a single connector on it. They peeled the brown pair out and terminated on a jack and plugged it into the top. Well, that's not the correct way to handle that. And so you're supposed to be pulling two cables at faceplate, but when it did start that conversation, because there was something, what's wrong with that? He just pulled an analog line out, and that gives you the opportunity to, as long as you do it in the right way, because there's two ways you can come back at that. You can come back at, you're an idiot, you don't know what you're doing, it's supposed to be blah blah blah, or you can use it as a training experience, a positive experience, and that gets the most results.
I've seen that over the years. Just was a Friday afternoon, and a longtime friend of the business and some contract company. He was in an area in Western Virginia, and they wanted better coverage. Their Wi-Fi coverage was horrible at this particular resort, and they're like, "Hey, can you guys come fix it?" Well, he snapped pictures and showed me that whoever came in and designed this, and what they said, it was not internal. There was a company that actually came in, literally took category cable, and every place it needed to go somewhere else, they used Scotch lock.
But you know what? I guarantee you somebody posted on there. Well, I bet you it still passes when you test it.
Well, and again, he did not actually post it. He was just showing me.
Oh,
he's like,
gotcha.
Look right down, and they don't understand how expensive it's going to be to actually do this right with patch panels and things, jacks, and the proper way of doing it. If you want to get it fixed, then we'll take care of it. But when it's fiber only related, I've had a couple in my career that highlight, and you just kind of have to laugh about it internally, because you have to put yourself in their shoes and say, well, how would they have known that? They with the education they had. And this one, the first one goes way back to the beginning of my career. We had a return. It was an amp. We had a fiber assembly, and I don't remember if it's STs or what they were, but I do remember it came. gosh, Monterey, I think it was Monterey Network, I think is who sent this cable back. And the complaint was it had hot spots. Chuck, I tested that cable assembly every which way that I could think about. I put it in a temperature chamber. I cycled this to make sure, hey, are they in a high humidity area, a high temperature? I can't find anything wrong with it. So finally I give up and I call the guy. And, he's talking about, hey, when he connects this thing, he said that element there, he said, it just glows bright red like a toaster. And he said, it's so hot, that it's leaking whatever the glow is leaking. He was connecting to a helium neon laser, or at least a red light 635 nanometer, something like that. But in his eyes, it was a copper element like a toaster, and it was getting so hot that it was glowing. Well, it's glass; it's got light going through it. That's what's glowing.
Right.
Another one, we went to. It was somewhere in rural Georgia that one of my FAEs, he and I went years ago, and the guy just screaming up and down, this fiber cable is junk. It's not working. I can't get connection. And we've all heard the rumors of this happening. I have to dig them up. I do have pictures of it. But we went in and this guy, he's dressing us down. And the FAE I had with me, he didn't really take a lot of people's crap, but we went in and guy took us right to the panel where the fiber was and where the problem is. And we took one look at it, and my colleague said, come on, I need to have a cigarette before I figure out how I'm going to address this guy. But he literally did punch them down. He punched fibers down to a 110 block.
No, he didn't.
He did.
You got pictures of that?
I have pictures of that, yes. I do have pictures. I got to think about this film camera at that time. But yes, it was, he literally punched down it. And he's like, we've got to figure out how to, say you're an idiot without saying you're an idiot.
Right.
And I'll say the third one, and I have to give this guy props for innovation. He was a copper guy. He was an electrician, told to do this fiber stuff, given a basic, here, just go do this. And he was using field installed connectors, a mechanical connector. If you don't know what you're doing with those, some people screw them up. Well, he called and gone through the procedure, said, I've watched your videos, done your instruction sheets. I think I'm doing everything right. So I'm asking him some key questions. Sounds like he's doing everything right. Well, I started to ask him about his referencing on his tester, just to make sure that everything was aligned. And I had said, is your coupling adapter, have you cleaned the sleeve? Is that clean? He goes silent. And I was like, are you still there? He's like, yeah, but what is this coupling adapter you're talking about? I said, well, when you're referencing or when you're testing, it's the adapter that the connectors latch into.
Mm-hmm.
He said, okay, that's probably my problem. I don't know what that is. I said, well, how have you been putting these together? And I kid you not, Chuck, he was using coffee stirrers. McDonald's. It was the only thing he said. I couldn't figure out how to put these connectors together. And he found one that would slide over it. And he said, if I put them both in there, I had to praise the guy just for getting the losses that he had good losses he was getting, right? But I had to credit him for his innovation. But it made me realize it's like, there are a lot of people out here that just simply don't have that training, don't have that exposure. He said, here's a bag of tools, go do this. Yep. And it just reinforces the importance of education. And you can go on and on different things here, but really those three, as I look back at my career, those three are just ones that just stand out to me. It's like, wow, you really have to put yourself in those people's shoes. They try to be a problem solver. Yep. That's what they tried to do. And just shows there's a lot need to be educated.
Absolutely. And there's two types of people. There's those that are willing to be trained, and there's those who, actually three. There's those who don't know. There's those that think they know, and they're the dangerous ones. They've been in the industry for like 3 to 5 years, and just because they've taken 1 or 2 classes or watched a couple of videos, they think they know everything. And then you get the ones who do know. The people who know a lot about the industry or know a lot about fiber or know a lot about copper, they're the ones that realize there's a lot they don't know. And those are the ones you'll find will be really driving towards getting that education. So I got another question for you. So I'm just coming off a road trip, taught 4 classes this week on the Eastern Seaboard. And I still can't help but notice we lack a lot of diversity in our industry. I think across the 4 classes, I think 3 females out of a total of like 60 some students. And even with, are you seeing the same thing on your side of the training, or is the industry getting better at this or not?
It's still not a 50-50 mix. We do have a fair amount of females that come through the classes. Some of them bring an awful lot of skill with them. One thing I will say with Light Brigade, we are lacking. All of our instructors at this current moment in time are male. We have had female instructors before, and we're actively pursuing a few to try to bring them on staff to do that, to bring that diversity. But yes, it is still. I believe it's probably about a 20%, even as industry goes, probably about only about a 20% that's female.
Mm-hmm.
What's also ironic, or what's interesting about that is, we hear these claims of differences, inequality in pay and salary between a male and female, and still goes on today, even though we all say it hasn't. Strangely enough, in the telecom industry, there isn't that divide. There are a lot of comparisons that show out there that they're within 1%, and I think that's a rounding. I mean, if you're at a 1% salary difference, that's a rounding. Right. Essentially, it's a safe space to get paid the exact same. Doesn't matter what your gender is. Yep. And there are just some incredible female technicians that we've seen through our classes that have even stepped in and assisted others and helped our instructors, saying, hey, look, I got this. This is what I do. I can help. And you really find that. So we really would love to. It's not only just the age difference; it's the gender gap that we want to end as well.
Yeah, one of the things I've found over being an instructor over a decade, especially when it comes to the fiber side, as a general statement, not always, I find that my female students are more willing to learn than the male students, and they're also usually better at terminating fiber. I don't know if that's because women have better fine motor skills or what the deal is there, but I mean, they consistently will knock them out of the park, where I've seen a lot of times guys. I don't think we'll ever get to 50-50 in our industry. I don't think we'll ever have 50% male, 50% female, because there's always going to be, there's some people who don't want to do hard manual labor. There's some people who rather, sit in an office and stare at a computer. And there's other people who just rather be out on the job site. Dude, I'd like to be on a job site, because you get to see all kinds of cool things.
Yeah. Chuck, you highlighted, you triggered a memory of mine that I had years ago in doing a training. I was doing a fiber training along with one of my colleagues who's doing a twisted pair training. And I don't remember if you've ever used what we call amp twist. I don't remember if you remember the amp twist, the jack, and you use that tool. And we were doing a training. It was a federal agency. I'm not going to name the name, but we were doing that. We were in Washington, D.C., and we had a group of probably about 12, 14 guys sitting in here. And there was I was called a receptionist. When we came in, she was the one that gave us our name badge and things like that. And I guess they all have a training requirement. Well, she missed part of it. She missed basically almost all of the copper training. And I think they were actually to the point of doing testing. And she came in and sat down to a spot. She picked up a terminated jack that one of the guys had done. She's looking at it. She's bending the cable on the back of it. Look at the front of it. She picks up the tool, lays it in there. She looked at me. She goes, "Can I try one?" Absolutely, sure. So I said, "Here." I gave it to her, and I just watched what she did. Now, mind you, we had guys that couldn't lace the thing properly. Trying to put the connector in backwards. Trying to shove the fiber or the copper cable in the front end. I mean, it's like basically, it's like, did you even listen to what we just said? Did you watch the demonstration? Meanwhile, this girl literally picks everything up, figures out how to use the tool, how to remove her jack, how to open pairs. The only thing I did help her with was cutting the central member, because the tool wasn't laying right there and she couldn't figure it out on the amp twist tool. I gave her the tool to do that. Other than that, she made an absolutely perfect termination without instruction. Very, very intuitive.
Mm-hmm.
I said to the supervisor of the group, I said, Dan, is there any reason you have her sitting at a desk writing out badges? Because I'm going to say this is absolutely your best technician that was here, and she's not one of your technicians. It was an interesting thing to watch, and just I like to watch how the human brain works, how people navigate through challenges. Like you said, there are those three groups, and you'll have the guys that most of the time that I know it all, and they're the ones that have the worst termination.
Yeah, and they don't want to teach anybody else. They want to keep it close to their chest.
Yes,
Yep.
yeah. It's amazing what people will hold on and be their own craft. I remember, another place I was one time, I think it was in Kentucky, and I was giving a class on mechanical splice connectors. The guy was talking about, oh, you're no, I don't like this. You're taking away my craft. This is my job. Figure eights are my job. And I'm a guy I kind of think on the fly, and I'll get into a debate with just about anybody on anything, just for the fun of it sometimes. And I said to the guy, I said, I said honestly, I say, if that's your craft, making eights, right? And I said, when doing a mechanical splice connector, doing the same method over and over again consistently is also a craft. And I said, I was a second grade school teacher. I said, most of those students are turning 8 years old. I said, what do you think would happen if I went into their classroom and I put this pink piece of paper on their desk and said, hold on to this like a pencil and draw your age 25 times on this pink paper? Do you think they could make 25 figure eights, which is essentially polishing?
Mm-hmm.
And the look on his face was just priceless, because it was an aha moment. Like, wow, this is the one little component that I've anchored myself as my craft, when in reality, I've got more skills than I'm giving myself credit for.
Right. Yeah, exactly right. When it comes to polishing and stuff, you a good technician should know how to do it, but there's so many other. I mean, you got fusion splicing and mechanical splicing, and a good technician is going to know all of those. And when somebody first comes in our industry, it used to be where you had to terminate copper for a year or 2 or 3 before they even let you look at fiber, right? What is your personal feelings on when somebody, if somebody comes to the industry tomorrow, how long do you think they should wait before they should start learning fiber skills?
Personally, I don't think they need to wait at all. I think that the days of that, and I think that's the older generations paying their dues, right? I think that I see as some of the worst trends that I've ever in my career that I've had to undo are things that practices that people have done on copper cable that they try to bring over to fiber.
Yeah.
I'll say the worst one is the whole idea of the 2 fiber or 2 cable reference in your testing. People put 2 cables together, they reference it, pull it together, and stick something in the middle, and realize they think they're getting a resistance, like an electrical resistance between that. When the reality is, you only measure 1 mated pair.
Yep. Yeah, I cover that every single class. I go the difference between 1 jumper reference and 2 jumper reference, and I'm very transparent in my classes because I tell them, look, I was doing 2 jumper references for 15 years because I thought that was the right way to do it, until somebody taught me and showed me why this method's better. And I go through exactly the same thing you just talked about, how the 1 jumper gets both mated pairs and the cable and the fiber in between. So we only have about like 1 minute and a half left. If you could go back to yourself when you're 18 years old and give yourself advice, what would that be?
The first thing I would have to say is enjoy the ride. Looking back, it's all going to work out. But at 18, I had no idea where I wanted to go in my career. I knew I wanted to be fiber. I'd actually pulled the fiber back in a science fair project, even before that. But it was just really not knowing where I wanted to go or what I wanted to do. And I got through college. I got my first job at AMP, and I remember the manager saying to me, he said, I'm sorry, your computer, we don't have your computer yet. We have your desk, your office. What am I going to use a computer for? Well, I found that, right? And as I went through a lot of that engineering time, I got to product management. I said, I want to be in the business side. I want a business degree. I went back to school and got a business degree. Once I had that degree, I realized I like the technical side of it better. So again, just go for the ride. You can't pre-write your future. Just take every little bit as a stepping stone, and that's right. What retain all the knowledge you possibly can, and figure out how I apply that to the very next thing. That's kind of how I've built my personal fiber encyclopedia in my head. That's really how
That's good, solid advice right there. Good, solid advice, because we do get focused on. And my path was kind of music. I got my degrees later in life, and now I've got my degrees, and I'd rather be back out in the field. I'd rather be out there with the guys and the gals terminating and pulling and stuff. But that's just me. So I appreciate you coming on. It was a blast. I shot this question at the last minute, but I'm gonna have to have you back on again. I think we got a lot more stuff we can talk about.
Absolutely. Anytime. I enjoyed this. Enjoy doing this. And yeah, it's great. Look forward to it.
Very cool. Until next time, everybody, remember, knowledge is power.
That's it for this episode of today's podcast. We hope you were able to learn something. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future content. Also, leave a rating so we can help even more people learn about telecommunications. Until next time, be safe.